All right, football fans, welcome to a Tuesday episode of the Call Sheet Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Smith, and I'm really pleased to have with me today, one voice and face that you'll recognize, Coach Paul Callahan, who's been with us many, many times. Coach Cal, welcome back to the show.
It's always a pleasure, Kev. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. And Coach Cal and I today have the privilege of interviewing a legend in the New Jersey coaching scene, a man who's been a head football coach. Let this sink in for a minute. A head football coach for 50 years, current Southern Regional High School head coach, Chuck Donohue. Congratulations, Coach, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Glad to be here.
Yeah, 50 years, Coach. You must have an amazing story to tell. We're going to get into all that. Really, we're going to talk about how's the game of football changed over your time. What are the biggest changes that you've seen and noticed? But to start us off, Coach, can you just kind of take us through your resume? 50 years. Where have you been?
Well, I started at St. Joe in Hamilton. I worked for Jimmy Gallagher, and Jimmy, brother Tommy, and I were friends growing up. And Jimmy was a little bit older, and of course, kind of like a big brother, as close to a big brother as I ever had. And then he was coaching at Holy Spirit, got the job at St. Joe's, and asked me to go with him. And of course, you know, that was a no-brainer for me. His sister Beatty was very influential because she got me to go to college. My plans were I graduated at 17. And my plans were going to service. And she said, with this opportunity, why don't you go to college and at the same time coach with Jim? And that's what I did. So went to Glassboro State, which is now Rowan, played there a few years for Dick Wacker, very influential in a lot of people's lives. And then left there. Well, Jimmy left and went to Cape May in 74. And then I took over the head coach and stayed till 80. Went to Haddon Heights till 85, actually 86, class of 86. And then to Buna. I was at Buna for 12 and left Buna and went to Southern Regional. And I've been there for 24, I think it's 25 coming up.
Wow. 25 years at Southern. Coach, how old is Southern Regional? I know you're not the only coach there, but Southern Regional hasn't been around for that long. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. I think they opened in 54. I think they opened.
Okay.
And you know, they've had two high schools break away. Both Pinelands and Barnegat both broke away from Southern. So it was a really big high school at one time. When my grandparents had a house on Long Beach Island, so I spent summers there as a kid. And it was a small Group 1 or Group 2. I think they were state champs in baseball. It was their first state championship in mid-50s. And they've just grown and grown from that, you know, from that standpoint. And like I say, two relatively large Group 3 schools broke away from Southern, or it would be an enormous school.
Yeah. So, Coach, I'm going to ask you a broad question here. Cal, feel free to jump in whenever. But I guess the big theme here of the first part of our show really is to try to pick your brain about some of the big picture changes you've seen throughout your time as a coach. I mean, if you go back to the early 1970s when you started to where we are today, obviously the game of football has evolved significantly. What are some of the things that really kind of jump out at you in terms of its evolution?
Well, and looking back, I think the biggest thing is most schemes offensively back in those days were gap schemes. There was a little bit of option that came on in the 70s, and a lot of teams did a good job with the split back veer and the wishbone were popular. But I think there was a lot of, you know, gap schemes, and if you add what you had to defend, which I'm not saying that gap schemes are easy to defend or difficult to defend, especially with some of the coaches who are in the Cape Atlantic League. But I think that the option and the zone blocking changed defensive and how you had to study defense. The old days of reading and all that kind of stuff. You had to come up with pressure packages and stuff like that because you weren't seeing. When I first started coaching, you were seeing gap schemes almost every week. As the 70s went by, all of a sudden now 1 week you had a gap scheme, 1 week an option, and then back to a gap scheme the following week. So there was a lot of adjusting for the kids, in the course of the year. And I think everybody was relatively a physical team, whether they ran the option or not, was a physical team. Weight training, I think, caught on in the 70s. Ocean City, certainly with Mike Silvestri, was one that got the lifting going. And then everybody, kind of teams got stronger. And when you get stronger, I think teams just wanted to pound you. And that's how they sold their weight program. We were going to be a physical team and you needed to be strong. And then, of course, in the 80s and 90s and into the 2000s, the zone schemes caught on and changed your ability to run the same defenses that you ran in the 70s to try and run them in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s would be very difficult to do and be successful. So I think there was changes on both sides of the ball, and I think the internet allowed so much information, coaches to get so much information and study the game, as opposed to going out to weekend clinics where you might only get a couple things, or visiting campuses and during spring practices. Now you have access 24 hours a day to all kinds of information. So you can it's easier to stay, hooked up or to follow what's going on in football and make your adjustments from season to season.
Coach, one of the things I've always admired about you is your willingness to change over the years. I'm talking specifically about scheme. You're at St. Joe in the 70s, and you're a Delaware wing T team, and then you go to a whole Haddon Heights, and you have a different scheme there. And then you go to Bunin, your Wishbone team. And when I first met you in the early 90s, you were a one-back inside and outside zone team, and you were always willing to change. How difficult was that, making those changes scheme-wise, and how important do you think that was to your evolution as a coach and, quite frankly, your ability to stay as a head coach for 50 years?
Well, I think in coaching, one of the things to do, one of the big mistakes that I've made in the course of my life as a coach is not adjusting to the personnel that you had. And just try and say we're a 50 team and be a 50 team on defense every single year. Whether you had a nose guard or whether you had defensive ends or the safeties to fill on run, you still tried to create that defense. And then same way offensively, try and stay in the wing T. When we went to we had a lot of success at St. Joe in the wing T. There wasn't a lot of schools running it. So we were unique. When we went to Southern Regional with the wing T, we got stoned the first couple of years. We just got manhandled up front with the wing T, with teams just was between stunning and the size of some of the schools that we were playing in the personnel. We just couldn't move the football. So we were forced to go to at Southern more of a spread outlook and take advantage of, some of the backs that we had and play to our defense a little bit. I think at Haddon Heights, we had a lot of tailbacks. We had a lot of good backs, Durkee, Gibson, and Danny Satterfield, and a lot of kids that we had back then were really one cut type kids that, responded to zone blocking, and we started the zone blocking at at Haddon Heights and had some success with that over the years. And then, like I said, we left there and went to Buna, and we had a ton of backs, and we're not real big linemen. We went to the Wishbone and had success with that. So it kind of evolved from just trying to fit an offense more into the personnel that we had, rather than stuffing the personnel into an offense that we had done in the past. I hope that answers it, Cal. But
yeah, it really does. And so that's obviously a big factor, you think, in your success, being able to adapt to the times. And one of those things, I guess, knowing you as well as I do, is the research that you did. You talked about it, the access to the internet and being able to access that information. But over time, you used to go to different schools to be able to study to make those changes.
Yeah, well, Delaware was the place to go when I started coaching. So when Jimmy left and went to Cape May, we were an I team at St. Joe, and I thought the wing T, I researched it at Delaware, and of course those guys gave such good access to it. John Oberg at Delsey was such a big help. Sal Marquese's father helped me with the line play. So I had a lot of help in those days to go to the wing T. And then, like I say, between the internet and all of the publications that are out there, you can study. And then guys are so good if you contact them and ask questions. So many college guys can tell you the good, the bad of what you're trying to do, and give you access to film and stuff like that. If you go on campus, you can watch spring practices and watch them inserting. So I think you have to be a student of the game to survive in it, especially today. And that's just what I was able to do. I had the support at home to go out and do what I needed to do to coach, which I think is really important. And I've been in places that supported you and gave you the money to stay overnight or stay for a couple of days at a school and get the information you needed. And I was kind of at the right place at the right time. There was so much, especially offensively and defensively. I mean, I'm saying there's not been changes in 50 years on defense, but I think offenses are the ones that create the change in the defense, So there was just so much going on with wishbone, split back veer, wing T, I formation. There were so many ways you could go and so much that you could learn. And it forced you, when you learn offense, it helps you defensively to game plan because you know what somebody's trying to do. So I think one kind of, fed into the other one. And I've been very lucky to have people help me along the way.
It's funny, Coach, you mentioned that all the resources available to you. I first got in touch with you because I read an article that you published in, I believe it was one of the Nike Coach of the Year clinic manuals, something like that.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was on RPOs. And I said, oh, man. And I was kind of redoing. I had just gotten the head coaching job at Ocean City, and I was sort of reworking our offense. And I read that article that you'd written and reached out to you about it. So it is fascinating how, like you said, man, there's so much available. There's almost too much available. At times I find myself overwhelmed.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying. I mean, and the access that you can create for your players to see things, to cut down on meeting time and have more time for practice or lifting or whatever you happen to be doing in season. And I think that's, I mean, obviously in all of our lives and almost everything in our lives, the internet's had an impact. And I can't think of anything that's in my life that's been more impactful than the internet for football.
Coach, you bring up players there. 50 years of coaching young men. The interesting thing about that, of course, you've gotten older. Their age hasn't changed. You're still coaching 14 to 18-year-olds. What's different about young men today, the kids that you coach, than they were 50 years ago? You hear a lot of people very critical of young people today. Oh, they're soft. They don't listen. They don't want to work. But what's your experience been? How do you think the young players have evolved over time?
I think the biggest thing is there's a lot of self-promotion, okay, with kids, where they don't understand that there's steps you have to take to be successful as a player. And a lot of kids try and go around some of those steps to be a player. They don't understand the importance of using your athletic ability in other sports. They don't understand the importance of weightlifting, not just to be a better football player, but protect your body a little bit. They're more concerned about summer camps and doing things like that sometimes than they are what they have to do in the summer to get ready for the season. So I think that's been something that I noticed. I think a lot of kids today understand the importance of grades in school. I think when I started coaching, everybody just thought, you're a good football player, somebody's going to pick you up. And I think over the course of time, players have realized how important the transcript is when they meet a college coach, and the college coach has their transcript in their hand and may not even be able to get the kid in because of the grades, regardless of how good a player he is. So I think they're the big thing. I think the internet has given a lot of parents a false idea of what the process is to play college football. They see things on the internet, again, in the self-promotion of a player. And when I say about self-promotion, let your grades and your playing ability be what determines where you're going, and not so much putting highlight films up on the internet and things like that about themselves to distract from football. In my opinion, is the greatest team sport there is. And once you get away from the team aspect and start making that an individual thing and making that more important than the team success, I think that's been a change that I've noticed. I think the athletes are certainly just as good as they ever were. I think that the level of football that they have to play in is better every year than it's ever been. I think we all run into good teams and have good teams ourselves for a year or two. But I think the schedule and the ability of people coaching these teams and the athletes they have make you as a coach have to get better and make your players better. Our biggest problem is running in the off season. We just have a hard time. I don't think we get better running in the off season. And that's why we've kind of directed our kids to track, because we have football coaches on the track squad that can watch those kids and work on their running form. So when the summertime comes, you're not working on form as much as you are just their condition and change of direction and burst of speed and those type of things. So yeah, it's a completely different game than, when I started 50 years ago. And I think some things are better and some things are not as good, but it's definitely a different game.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to ask you, Coach. It's interesting to hear you talk about like the self-promotion aspect of it. And it's funny, a couple of guys that Kevin and I coached against were drafted in the first and second round last week or a couple weeks ago in the draft. The edge from Boston College who went in the second round, I think, to the Cowboys, and then the linebacker from Alabama. We coached against both of them that went to the Eagles. And you've coached NFL players, several NFL players, Mike Gesicki being one who's still playing. How has expectations for players in college and scholarship, how has that changed since 1973, when you first started coaching? And how have you dealt with those unrealistic expectations, or what way do you work with those, with the parents?
Well, I think one thing that's really important is when you think you have a kid that has the size and the grades, the size, the speed, and all that kind of stuff to play major college football, is make sure that they go and watch colleges in spring practice and watch spring practice and see the caliber of athlete that they'll be competing at down the road. I think that that's very important because there's an unrealistic idea that if I'm 6'4" and 270 pounds, I'm going to be a scholarship player. That's just not the case. There's so many factors that are involved in it: your athletic ability, your grades, your speed, your film, all that kind of stuff. And I think there was more scholarships when I first started coaching. There was more scholarships out there than there is now, and it's harder to get one now than it was back in those days. You had kids that were recruited specifically on size, not on their playing ability or what they showed on tape, but just their size, with the idea that we'll make that kid a player. And yes, sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. A kid like Kazicki was a 3-sport athlete. He played basketball and volleyball. He played defensive back. He played some quarterback. He played some wide receiver. And he was a legitimate number one. He was a player of the year in the state in volleyball, and an all-star in basketball, and an all-star in football, and could have gone to college for any of those 3 sports, So to try and take credit for him, I'm not trying to do that. But I think at the same time, he was exactly what you need to be. Pacheco, you had against him at Violent, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that kid was a multiple sport athlete. He was tough. He played offense. He played defense, and he would play, I guess, wherever they needed him. And I think when you have the ability to do that, to play multiple sports, you make yourself more valuable as a recruit. If a guy can look at you and say, yeah, well, he's a running back, but he can play corner or he can play safety, he can return kicks, and create that kind of information about you to be recruited, and not worry so much about just what size you are, or just what your weight is or something like that, or your time in the 40, because there's just so much more to the recruiting process than that.
It's funny.
Those guys are.
I'm sorry, Coach, but I was reminded. I was listening to a podcast, and it was with Brandon Marsh, the outfielder for the Phillies, and they said to him, "Well, don't you think you need to go to the travel ball and this thing and that thing during the off season?" And he goes, "I was first team All-State wide receiver in Georgia." So here's a guy who's playing in Major League Baseball who was also, he goes, "I was recruited for football as much as I was for baseball." Yeah. So to go about as far as not having to specialize like you're talking about.
Yeah, I just think, because you don't know where it's going over 4 years. You just don't know how that's going to go, and the only way to find out where it's going is to play. And I think too many kids concentrate on one sport when they can gain. Like, we have Dylan Larson's our line coach, and he's the throwing coach in track. So winter track and spring track, he's got a good core of our linemen with him, and he's able to do all kinds of things with those as far as agility goes, and power lifting a little bit different than we do it with the linemen. I mentioned before, we have 2 guys in the track team that coach, and they can bring these kids on and find events for them to be successful in, and create their confidence and some of those kind of things that you get from, another sport. And maybe you do end up in another sport. I mean, Kazicki could have been a volleyball player at Penn State. He could have been a basketball player at Penn State. I don't think there's any question about that. He was, such an athletic kid. But how many of those do you get in your lifetime?
Not too many.
Yeah.
Coach, that's great advice. And hey, listen, so we're gonna wrap this episode here, and we're gonna come back tomorrow with Coach Cal and Coach Donohue and talk about the head coaching job and what are some of Coach Donohue's observations about being a head coach, specifically advice to young head coaches or aspiring head coaches. things that have allowed him to be so successful over the course of 50 years. So thanks to both of you for this episode. And we're going to sign off, and we're going to come back tomorrow.
Thanks, Kev.
Thank you.
All right. So for Coach Chuck Donohue and Coach Paul Callahan, this is Kevin Smith. Join us again for part 2 of our interview tomorrow. Take care, everybody. I'm just gonna start this over. In a couple seconds, you'll hear that music start right up again. Hey, Cal, I'll let you first, okay? Because
okay.
I know you got a bunch of questions you wanted to ask.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, cool. I'm gonna start this up. You guys good? You good, Chuck?
I'm good. Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, welcome, football fans, to a Wednesday episode of the Call Sheet Daily podcast. This is Coach Kevin Smith, and this is part 2 of our conversation from yesterday with my good friend Paul Callahan, frequent visitor on the show. Welcome back, Coach Cal.
Thanks for having me, Kev.
Absolutely. And as we had on yesterday, Coach Chuck Donohue, who is celebrating 50 years as a head football coach here in the state of New Jersey, multiple champion. Hey, Coach, is it true that I don't know, I don't want to get this wrong, but is it true that you're possibly the only coach in New Jersey to take 3 separate programs to a sectional championship?
Yeah. I'm not sure about that, Kev.
Okay.
I'm not sure about. I was at one time. I know that for one time because there was a booster at a very helpful guy at St. Joe's named Angelo Viviano, and he informed me of that years ago. But I don't know.
Well, I had read something along this
Kevin, we've lost some too, man. So.
Well, just if you've been around long enough to be able to say that you've won and lost sectional titles, I mean that's a heck of an accomplishment. So in yesterday's episode, we talked with Coach Donohue about how the game of football has changed over his 50-some years as a coach. He's been a head coach for 50 years, and in today's episode, we're going to focus on the head coaching position and some of the things that he can impart, some of the wisdom that he's gathered along the way and that he can impart about being a head coach. Coach Cal, I'm going to let you pick up there.
Coach, I first met you in the early 90s when I was at Del Val, and Coach Manlove was our boss, and we were trying to decide, what schools we were going to hit in recruiting because we didn't get the job until late February and get out on the road. And he was saying, listen, when you get to New Jersey, go to the schools where we've got kids from already, but make sure you get down to Buda and talk to Chuck Donohue. He had that much respect. He said, this is a guy who we've got to reach out to and get a connection with our program at Del Val. And, this is an NCAA Hall of Fame coach talking about you like this. And so over the years, you've been an invaluable resource to me. Coach Donohue knows if he gets a phone call from me at 7 a.m, it's coaching related. I'm in some kind of crisis and I need to talk to Coach Donohue right away. He's my first guy I go to. So one of the things that we've talked about over the years is the role of the head coach, and particularly the role of the head coach as a program builder. How detailed, how much micromanaging does the head coach have to be? How all-encompassing is the role of the head coach and in running a program, in your opinion?
Man, I just think I had a really good college coach, and Coach Wacker was a very influential man in my life. And his idea was that as a head coach, you're there to help assistants and to help the players. And the most important role you have is making sure that they're taken care of, they're taught to the best of your ability. And as a head coach, your job is to make sure that everybody does their job to make those players as good as you can make them. And he had a really, big influence on my life. Jimmy Gallagher, I couldn't have worked for a better guy when I started out because he let you coach. He expected you to be prepared every day. He expected you to coach the kids and care about the kids off the field. Um, Following their grades, make sure they were staying out of trouble, those type of things. So that was very helpful for me. And I think that the first thing I did when I went into a new job was I met every returning player one-on-one. And I can't remember who told me to do that, but somebody did tell me to do that. And some of those talks went for 5 minutes. Some of those talks went for a half hour. But you just let them go in the direction they were going. And I think Coach Wacker had the ability to make the last guy on the roster feel like he was a starter. He just had that ability. I know you know him, Cal, from being over there and the kind of guy he was, but he just had that ability to make you feel important and to make you feel like the team needed you. And I think that's one thing I've carried over in the places I've been. I've tried to make everybody feel that they were part of what we were doing, and that the coaches encouraged that. I think our staff coaches sports in the winter and coaches in the spring, and we have good contact with the athletes, so they're able to relay back to me if something's gone bad in the kid's life, or kids looking for a job, or the kid's struggling in this or that, so I can get involved a little bit and take care of those things to make sure we have all our players when we start in August, and we haven't lost some along the way, either because of family issues or problems that come into the kid's life that I think you have to be involved with, because there's a risk to play in this game, probably a higher risk of injury than any sport there is. It's a high impact collision sport, and I think you can get a kid through 4 years of high school football coaching just by getting them in the right position group. I think, where he can have a little bit of success and where there's going to be a coach watching over him and doing the best they can to get the kid on the field in some kind of a role, to get them involved. And I think the game is not about the head coach. It's just not about the head coach. I think in some places it turns into that, but it's about the assistants and the power that they have to work with the kids and make the kids better and make the kids want to be part of our football team for more reasons than just playing football. As crazy as that sounds, I think that's very important. That's the way I was. I needed football more than football needed me. So I'm just trying to carry that over with the way I've coached, over the years. And I've had, good success. I was lucky that Violet was in college the same time I was in college and playing. So she knew the time commitment that was made as a player. So when I was coaching, she understood the time commitment I had to make and allowed me to do the things I had to do, even if it was at the last minute, just like you guys have been through. You guys know what I'm talking about. No, I have to be here. I can't go Friday because I have to be here. And it was understood. And I think, that's just part of it. I just think that's part of the game. And probably one of the things that I do best is letting coaches coach, let the positions coaches coach, and contribute to our practice schedule. And I think that's, like I say, letting those guys feel some value in what we're doing, and rather than it being me as, I'm not a difference maker when it comes to a ball game. The kids are the ones that are the difference makers, and you've got to get them ready to win those games and be in those situations. And I've just had a lot of experience doing that. I also had the advantage of being cut in high school one year, and I think that helped me a lot. because as a player, because something was really important to me was no longer there. And I could have gone a lot of different directions, but I didn't, and came back and tried to play again in college and went to the right place where there was a head coach that, as I said, saw value in all of us. And I think in a lot of ways, Coach Wacker saw a lot of his players as being coaches down the road. And so, that was an important thing in his preparation of the players that, that I played with in college. So I hope that answers it. It's probably a little long-winded, but.
No, it's great. It's one of the things I was thinking about as I was listening to you talk was similar to Sal, you've had some of the same coaches with you. I mean, for 25 years, the time you were at Southern, and you had those guys who were with you for 12 years. You seem to be able to coach. You do keep the same coaches for an extended period of time, like Sal does at Delsey. Do you think that empowering of the coaches is a big part of that?
I think that's critical. I really do. I really do think that's critical because even your week's preparation. I'm not speaking for you or Kevin, but I think you just can't. You can't try and have all the things on the defensive game plan and all the things on the offensive game plan running through your head when you're trying to call a game on Friday night. Somebody's got to be able to take some of that responsibility and make sure that we're staying on the path of the game plan. Make sure that we're, they're doing the things that we talked about all week at practice to win the game, that we're doing them on Friday night. And I think access and responsibility to coaches are both up in the press box, on the sideline, with special teams, with position groups, making sure that the rotation of the players into the game was what we talked about all week. And I think that's really important. And I think when you make the assistant and make the staff members feel that they're contributing to the success of the program, then you're going to get a better coach out of them. You're going to get a better effort out of them. And they're going to have a lot of fun coaching and want to stay around, because it's hard. Coaching is hard. I mean, it's not easy, as you guys know. And there's a lot of good days in it. There's more good days in it, obviously, than there is bad days. But bad days can make you question yourself.
Coach,
I've always been lucky to have loyal assistants around me.
Coach, you don't have the type of success that you've had for as long as you've had it without being able to practice extremely well. I mean, football is a unique sport in that you're only playing one time a week and there's an awful lot of preparation time. How have you really been able to be successful as a practice coach? What are your expectations of your players and your staff in practice that will allow you to prepare for a game?
Well, our staff coaches on both sides of the ball, but in preparation, we have a defensive staff that works on the weekend on the defensive plan, and an offensive part of the guys just worry about the offensive game plan. And then we talk Sunday morning, via the telephone as we're both meeting. So I think that's happened a lot. And I think the staff knowing what the game plan is and what their role is in making. Sometimes the running back coach is the most important coach during that week. Another week it might be the offensive line, because you're going up against a superior defensive line. So who the most important coach is changes from week to week. And I think it's important that everybody feels part of the game plan and part of what we're doing. We practice defense first every day. Every single day, everything we do starts with defense. So our first hour and 10 minutes of practice is completely dedicated to the defensive game plan. And then we finish practice. The next hour and 10 minutes is offense. We go through it just like everybody else. We have an indie period, we have a group period, and then our situational, 1st and 10, 2nd long, 2nd short. We go through that type of thing, just like the defense of staff does. So I think keeping everybody involved and giving them empowerment in the game plan, and then making sure that they feel that they're important in getting the game plan installed during the week is the key to coaching and keeping guys around, because it's hard. It's really hard when you're changing coaches, 3 and 4 coaches. Like I talked to some guys that are changing 3 or 4 coaches every couple of years, and the kids get used to a certain coach, and now they've got to make an adjustment, and you've got to make adjustment in how you insert the game plan in during the week. You, as a head coach, you have to worry about things when there's a turnover. I don't worry about what's going on in defense. I know those guys, that defense is going to be ready on Friday night in both the scheme and the preparation. And then I just have to worry about complementing the defense and not calling plays that puts the defense in jeopardy because you turn the ball over in a situation that, you shouldn't have been doing that run or that pass against that team. And, I think keeping them involved is really, really the big thing.
Coach, over the years, you've left 3 schools and taken over new programs. You talked about meeting the players when you take over a new program. I know you've established a weight room culture when you've gone to these new programs, because I knew you well when you went to Southern and you did that there. I knew, of course, what you did at Buna, because that was still such a big part when I came to coach there, and having that staff. What do you say to a coach who's taken over a program? What are the essentials, the non-negotiables, in your opinion, of taking over a new program? Like I said, 3 times you've done it, and they weren't very successful before you got there, and they had great success after you got there. So what are the things what sort of advice would you give to a coach taking over a new program?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to have mandatory off-season conditioning. That's got to be a mandatory thing. We have a system that has worked in everywhere I've been. At St. Joe's, the kids did whatever you told them to do. You know what I mean? They were in the weight room, 5 nights a week. If you'd have to throw them out, that's just the way those kids were. Then went to the public school. We set it up that each season, winter, spring, and summer, they had to get 25 weight room credits. They could get those credits by a workout, or they could get those 25 credits by playing in another sport. And we directed the kids to other sports because there's just so much in competition. It's great for kids to be exposed to different levels of competition, both personally and as a member of another team. And then they have to have 75 credits in order to start practicing with us. So I think that's been important. And then we lift on Saturday, Monday, and now Dylan Larson, our line coach, is an in-school strength coach. So he has the athletes in season during gym class. So we get a lot of that done, and we emphasize the strength and conditioning, with our players, with the normal stuff that everybody does, charts and T-shirts and stuff like that. But I think that if anybody was to say to me, what's the most important thing you have to do when you take over a program, I think it's inserting a strength and conditioning program that allows your kids to feel confident when they walk on the field.
It's funny,
and that's worked 3 places that I've been in. And like I said, you have to, in your interview process, you got to make that clear. You got to know that you're getting the support from the administration and the board on that particular thing. And I think once you present it to them and they understand the importance and of strength training for safety alone, not just for winning football game, but for their personal safety, they buy in and support you on it.
It's funny, Coach Cal. I'll let you hop back in a sec. I'm just going to make this quick remark. You've talked at length now over the course of the better part of 2 podcasts about all these lessons that you've learned and these things that you would recommend to younger coaches. You've talked very little about scheme. And it's really interesting how much the game, especially from a head coaching standpoint, is about so many other things besides scheme. I think a lot of young coaches think, oh, well, it's about their first questions are like, oh, what are you going to run? And it's amazing how that doesn't, if you're going to be a really good head coach, that doesn't enter the equation until far down the list.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are head coaches. You understand. It just doesn't end. You know, I mean, your season ends on Thanksgiving or in the state playoffs or whatever. It ends, and you're just picking up a couple weeks later and starting this thing all over again, trying to eliminate some of the things that didn't work with this particular group, trying to make a couple subtle changes that makes it feel like it's another season to the kids. And then again, your coaches start on the internet and they start on the clinics, and we sit down and talk about schemes and players constantly, just like you guys are constantly talking about players. You know, what do you think? Do you think this guy can fit in here? Does he fit that? What are you looking for? Like, I'll talk to Matt and say, what are we looking at is what we call our stud, which is the guy that plays over the tight end. And what are we looking for in our RAM, and how many, which is to the open side, and how many of those guys can play either position? Or we caught in a situation we have 3 guys that can play on the tight end and 3 guys that can play on the open side of the field. And maybe we got to move somebody around. So I think there's just so much that goes into the season that people probably don't even think of or don't think is that important. It's really important. You know, we're dealing with kids now with jobs, you know, and kids getting jobs, trying to get kids jobs. And I've got a lot of employers that contact me and say, I need 2 guys, or I need a guy for here. And you're trying to fit them in jobs where they can make weight room in the morning. And when practices start in August, you know, the employer knows that, you know, they have practice in the morning, so schedule them at another time. And I think all those kind of things that you get involved with it as a head coach to make your program operate a little bit smoother. So I think that's really important.
Coach, one time I talked about a little bit on the last podcast about my 7 a.m. phone calls to you. Whenever I had some kind of question about coaching, whether it was a quarterback change when we were at Rowan or at Buna, or there was some kind of problem in the program, something that I perceived as a crisis. I remember still talking to you at Southern during the Ram camp one year when my mom was very ill, and just having you as a counselor that somebody could talk to. But one of the things I found most impressive about you is, like, you could identify what was a crisis and what wasn't. How to handle each situation, how to treat a big situation like a big situation, and how to not, if it wasn't a crisis. So what are your sort of thoughts on, like, handling crisis or handling situations that come up and determining the best course of action?
I think the biggest thing that's important is, as the head coach, is you gotta roll with things a little bit. You've got to act like you're calm and collected when you're not. I think it's no different than the sideline, you know, on Friday night. I think you always have to seem like, yeah, we're okay. We're going to be all right. This is going to work, without having to say anything. I think when you have to talk a lot as a coach with the players, when you have to talk, it's too much. When you feel like you're in a situation where I got to justify this, or I got to say this or say that, you're talking too much. You've got to be cool when you're not a cool guy. You still got to be a cool guy. And I think that when you're the head coach, there's got to be a consistency to you, so that when you do get excited or riled up, it's not something that they've seen before, that it's something that they know that this is important, and you're trying to create some excitement or something about a problem that you're having with the team that doesn't have to be addressed with the whole team. And you can stay calm and collected and focused on what's going to happen on Friday night. I think a lot of times as a young coach, I got too emotional at the wrong time. And I got upset when I shouldn't have got upset, because it was something that could have easily been fixed. I made a big deal out of something that wasn't a big deal. and sometimes things that should have been made a big deal, I missed. And I think just by hanging around coaching for as many years as I have, you kind of get a calmness to you that no matter what happens, we'll figure this thing out, and I'll be excuse me, and I'll be able to figure it out, so that the kids can stay focused on what they have to do.
Interesting. Coach, I'm going to get you out of here on this. We'll wrap it up. It's been a wonderful conversation, both yesterday and today. And let me just ask you this last question. You're a Hall of Fame coach. You've won multiple sectional titles. You've had success at multiple different schools. What keeps you going? What still makes you feel very passionate about being a head coach and coaching football?
I think I constantly look back at what the game has done for me, who was not an outstanding player, the experiences that I've got, the sensations you get from when you have a good day, when you have a bad day. I've kind of had the ability to internalize all those experiences, and I can deal with whatever the kids are going through, because I've kind of felt that way. We all know that when things are going good, you don't have to worry about that guy as much as the guys that things are not going good for them. And I think you have to talk to them. And I've just been in so many of those situations. I just feel I can handle that. I can handle those and grab that kid and pull him aside and at least identify with what he's going through and try and talk him out of it. I think that I wish I was starting all over again, to tell you the truth. But we're coming to the end of it rather than the beginning of it. And I'd just like to help, like these podcasts that you do, trying to make people better coaches, trying to make people think of things that maybe they didn't think about before, rather than running into that wall. And now it's in the middle of the week and we've got a crisis on our hands with morale or with the psyche of the kids going into this game that I should have identified. There's not too much that I can see right now that I haven't seen before. And that only comes with time. And like I say, I think it's a great game. I think it's a game that can really take a kid and build his confidence to go into the next step of his life, whether that's job interviews or the chances of them, their first job being as part of a group, a part of a team. The company they go with or the organization they go with is part of a team, and they know how to function within that team. I think it's very important, and I've just, I've been lucky. I'm telling you, I've been at good places. I've had good backing. I've had good assistant coaches. I've had great kids, and I feel been very lucky to be caught in the middle of that, as opposed to I've created something. I think I'm good at reacting to things when they go bad, and identifying what I have to do so I don't waste time or make a mistake that I know I should have known better after 50 years of coaching.
Well, Coach, I learned a lot. I'm sure anybody who listened has learned a tremendous amount from you, and I'm tremendously appreciative for your time. Coach Cal, final thoughts?
Yeah, Coach, I just want to thank you. You've been an unbelievable resource for myself, both personally and professionally. And I wish for every young coach that they could have a mentor, a friend like Coach Donohue has been for me. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart, Coach.
Well, thank you. I know that, Cal.
What you've done for this game and for myself.
Yeah, and I miss the Cape Atlantic League. I will say that. I miss the guys down there. I miss the teams. I follow the Cape Atlantic League. And, we're up to, we got our problems with some of the teams we have to play up here, but I do miss the tradition of the Cape Atlantic League and all the guys that are down there. And I follow them every week. I love coming to you guys 7-on-7. It's really well run, and we get a lot out of that. So anything I can do for anybody at Ocean City, I'm glad to. Just give me a call, and whatever I can do or contribute, I'd be glad to. And I like the opportunity that I get to talk to you guys the last couple nights.
Well, thanks so much, Coach. Again, man, it was a privilege, and I'm really appreciative that we were able to have this time.
Good.
So, for Coach Chuck Donohue, for Coach Paul Callahan, this has been the Call Sheet Daily. Join me again tomorrow, Thursday episode. We turn our attention back to the NFL. It's our State of the Franchise show where we will focus on the ever interesting Cleveland Browns and what's going on there in Cleveland. So, for again, Coach Donohue and Coach Callahan, have a great Wednesday, everybody.
Good night.